Tonight on The Wrap, Iran has a new supreme leader. Mojtaba Khamenei is to be the new ruler of the country, taking over from his father, who was killed on the first day of the conflict. In an exclusive interview with Sky News, the Qatari Prime Minister calls for a de-escalation of the war and says he feels a deep sense of betrayal from the Iranian attacks on his country.
This miscalculation by the Iranians to attack the Gulf countries has destroyed everything.
Seventh member of the US forces killed in the war, injured in Iran's initial counterattack on Saudi Arabia. The soldier has now died from those injuries. Heavy explosions are heard across Tehran and oil refineries are hit as the bombing campaign escalates. Keir Starmer spoke today to Donald Trump for the first time since the war started 8 days ago, and following the social media volley from the US president, who said he doesn't need the UK any longer. We discuss the day's biggest stories with the London bureau chief of The National, Damien McElroy, and political editor at Politics Joe, Ava Santina Evans. Plus, a first look. Good evening. Within the last hour, Iran has announced that Mojtaba Khamenei, the son of the late supreme leader, has been named his successor. His father, the Ayatollah, was killed in the first wave of airstrikes in the war when his compound was flattened. Donald Trump has demanded a say in who becomes the next leader, and it's fair to say this probably would not be his choice. All this on the day the Prime Minister of Qatar has made an urgent plea in an interview with Sky News for all sides to de-escalate. More of that shortly. Well, Damien and Ava are here, and a thought from you about the appointment of the new supreme leader.
Well, Trump has previously said the appointment of Mojtaba would be unacceptable. It's very likely he could reject this appointment. And I think that there is a suggestion here, or perhaps we should be looking at the lessons from the Iraq War, which is, should you be deposing a leader if you're not confident you're going to have a say in getting your way at the end of it?
Damien?
I think the appointment suggests the hardliners are still in control. I think they've still got the same mindset as before. And in the real world, that's where Trump went in fighting into Iran, and so they may be in a mood to compromise down the line, but I don't think they will be.
So possibly nothing has changed. Well, let's hear from Alistair Bunkle on Iran's new supreme leader.
Mojtaba Khamenei has been officially named as Iran's new supreme leader, only the third in the country's history. But who is he, and why might his appointment be controversial? Here are 4 things that I think you need to know about him. Mojtaba is the 56-year-old son of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, the former supreme leader who was killed in his compound in Tehran on the first day of the war. Mojtaba wasn't there, he survived, but his mother, wife and daughter were all killed. So he takes over from his father, in effect creating a dynasty, a bit like a monarchy. But Iranians don't like dynasties. They overthrew the Qajar dynasty in 1925 and then the Pahlavi monarchy in 1979. The position of the supreme leader is not just the ultimate authority in Iran. He, and it is always a man, is the guardian of the Islamic Republic. But Mojtaba Khamenei has only ever been a mid-ranking cleric, not a senior Ayatollah. The only reason, perhaps, that he's been appointed is because of his surname, Khamenei. And that is another reason to question his credentials for the role of supreme leader. Little is known about Mojtaba Khamenei. He's generally kept a low profile, but he did serve in the Revolutionary Guard during the Iran-Iraq War in the 1980s, building up valuable connections, and he has been linked with the violent suppression of protests in Iran over the years. Unlike his father, though, who was a well-known intellectual, a strong orator with a following inside Iran before he became supreme leader, Mojtaba does not have a strong reputation inside the country. And fourthly, Mojtaba has never held public office or been elected into anything. But he is close to the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, and that is important because they would have been instrumental in his appointment. And it suggests that the hardliners retain some power in Iran, and that does not bode well for any negotiations to end the war.
Well, our US correspondent James Matthews joins us now. And James, we've suggested previously that Donald Trump perhaps would not be in approval of this appointment of the Supreme Leader.
Hi, Gillian. Yeah, he made that abundantly clear, calling him acceptable. He said this to Axios of Mujtaba Khamenei just a few days ago. They are wasting their time. Khamenei's son is a lightweight. I have to be involved in the appointment, he said, like with Delcy Rodriguez in Venezuela. And he added that he would refuse to accept a new Iranian leader who would continue with Khamenei's policies. He said that would simply force the United States to go back to war in 5 years. So he's already discounted this individual. I suppose much depends on what we hear from Khamenei when he makes some kind of public statement, something of a mysterious character. Iranians don't hear much from him, but it remains to be seen how different he is, if at all, from his father. He's very much cut from the same cloth. All the discussion is that he is at least as hardline as his father was, you know, embedded in the IRGC and so on. And of course, part of a regime, a system that is multi-layered with a consistent ideology running through it. So how this squares with Donald Trump's justification for this conflict, and bear in mind that seems to change on a regular basis, remains to be seen, and it is a serious test of Donald Trump, because if the new man is seen to be the same as the old man, then it does beg the question, you know, what's changed? Why did we go to war in the first place? And it has to be far-fetched, the notion that this will be a man who will do Donald Trump's bidding. He said something else to ABC today, Gillian. He was asked, would he approve of somebody connected to the old regime? His answer was, I would, in order to choose a good leader. So who knows, perhaps some room for manoeuvre there, but you know, Khamenei is very much connected to the old regime, not necessarily a good leader as Donald Trump would see it. We know that because he told us as much a few days ago.
Yes, absolutely. James, for the moment, thank you very much. Well, Eva, I mean, as James is saying there, what has changed if Mujtaba is, you know, cut from the same cloth as his father and very much embedded in the IRGC?
Well, it would show you that the hardliners are still in control in Tehran. And the problem you've got here is this is, you know, arguably a confrontational move. This could escalate the conflict with the Gulf states, with the US and with Israel, particularly if Trump, you know, says tonight or this evening that he rejects that appointment. But, you know, there's big questions now for Keir Starmer, because is it right to, in this escalating conflict, is it now right to send the warship that he'd already promised? And actually, you know, it's almost laughable thinking about what Trump had said overnight on Truth Social, where he said that he didn't want the UK to join in, this war was already won. Actually, this appointment suggests the war is not anywhere near over. The war actually is escalating. Yeah,
and Damien, we know that he's under a death threat from Israel already before he's even started his first day.
Yes, I mean, given how they went in and almost immediately killed his father because he was the supreme leader, that is definitely what the countries who are attacking Iran, US and Israel, are likely to do now, is to seek to make another change, because he is so similar to what went before. As was said from Washington, he doesn't have a public profile. He doesn't really have any personal following. He just represents something, and what he represents is the very thing that the Americans and the Israelis went in to attack just over a week ago.
And Eva, the Iranian regime proving perhaps more robust than Donald Trump thought they might be. They haven't collapsed, they haven't surrendered, and are continuing to strike across the Middle East against their neighbours.
Well, it's interesting because you had Mike Katz just a couple of days ago sort of celebrating that Iran had a depleting ballistic missiles, you know, pot of ballistic missiles that they were using. Also, their air defences and their naval defences had been dramatically reduced. He was laughing, or sort of almost gloating, that actually there were tens and tens of warships that were now at the bottom of the ocean, thanks to the US. You know, the strikes that we've now seen in the last couple of hours and throughout today would suggest that perhaps the Americans have overestimated how much they have depleted those stores.
Mm. And are we seeing a bit of a mission change now? Because originally it was meant to be regime change, and we've seen now to targeting oil structures, infrastructure, and moving away from that regime change, although that was the initial claim.
Yeah, I mean, it's cause and effect, right? They have gone in, they are trying to have an effect, which is to get rid of the power brokers in Tehran. And we've seen a muted reaction on the markets, but we have seen the Strait of Hormuz close and oil supplies have been disrupted. So for the Americans now to start playing that card means, yes, they are trying to put pressure on the people left in Iran who hold the strings so that they can try and get an outcome that will in some way let them move on, let them achieve something out of this situation.
Mm. And James, how is this going to play with the American public, especially as, you know, the president is having to report on the 7th member of the US forces being killed?
Yeah, you know, Gillian, it's not been a great few hours, I think, in terms of how this war is playing out, how it is being reported. We do have that 7th member of the US service personnel confirmed as a fatality, and also this move in Tehran, which, you know, as Eva mentioned, it has to be confrontational, and Americans will be watching this. You know, they are fed this diet of news conference and phone interview by the president where, you know, you get this hyperbole-laden reportage of how they are beating Iran to hell. That's the phrase that Donald Trump used on Truth Social yesterday. But all of a sudden, you know, you have the new guy in Tehran, Tehran thumbing its nose at the United States, and a clear signal that it is not going to surrender, and the clear suggestion that this conflict could actually last longer than we were previously told, and that the length of the duration of conflict will not necessarily be down to the Americans alone. So there's that, but also this business of casualties returning to the United States. Yesterday, half a dozen of them. President Trump roundly criticised for wearing a white baseball cap as he honoured the fallen, gave them the salute on the tarmac at that Delaware air base. So, you know, it's chaos warfare, it's uncertain, and the longer it continues, the more political jeopardy it entails. I think Donald Trump is beginning to find that out, and you know, he is trading on limited political capital. It's not popular in this country as casualties come home, as petrol prices go up, and that is key moving forward. So, you know, there are difficulties for Donald Trump in all of this, and underpinned, of course, by the lack of a consistent justification for the conflict, an argument to present to the American people that they are buying.
Indeed. James, for the moment, thank you. And also the possibility, very distinct possibility, of bringing other areas within the region into the conflict. And the Prime Minister of Qatar has made an urgent plea for all sides to de-escalate. He spoke exclusively to my colleague Yalda Hakim as dark smoke billowed over the capital of Tehran after oil facilities there were hit. Let's hear part of that interview.
Sheikh Mohammed, it's very good to see you. We're here in your office in Doha, where you've been dealing with ballistic missiles, you've been dealing with drone strikes from Iran. Just how difficult a period has this been for Qatar?
Well, unfortunately, you know, it's been like a very difficult period for the entire country. But, you know, we have our defense and security personnel has been doing a great job in defending the country and its people, citizens, visitors, and residences who are here. Of course, these attacks on the Gulf countries in general, plus Jordan, Turkey, Azerbaijan, we never expected this to come to us from our neighbor. We were always building this relationship in preserving the good neighborhood and relationship in a good faith with Iran. Unfortunately, there are some justifications and pretexts that they've been using to justify these attacks on the state of Qatar and the other countries, which is totally rejected, and no one will be able even to justify them.
You just mentioned there that you have always tried to maintain diplomatic relations with Iran. Certainly Qatar has, and they've tried in many ways to maintain those relationships despite Iran facing global isolation. Do you feel betrayed?
Well, of course, it is a big sense of betrayal. This is the second time. That's why it's also for us, it's been something really significant to see the attack, which was showing that being pre-planned. Once the war started, just maybe an hour after the start of the war, Qatar and the other Gulf countries being attacked right away. And all of us before this war, and repeatedly we've been saying and repeating that we are not going to take part of any attacks or any wars against our neighbors. We would like to see a peaceful neighborhood. We were helping Iran and the United States in reaching diplomatic solutions. But this miscalculation by the Iranians to attack the Gulf countries has destroyed everything. Our countries don't want to be part of this war, and we would like to see them stopping right away.
As you say, a disaster for the world. It's not just about the region.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, we have seen what are the cascading effects of this escalation, and we are just a week from this conflict. And it's we need to ensure first that Iran should stop all the attacks against the Gulf countries and the other countries that they are attacking, and they are not party of this war. We need to seek a way to de-escalate the situation and to find diplomatic solution whenever it's possible.
And a reminder that you can watch Yalda's full interview with Qatar's Prime Minister on all Sky News platforms from 6 a.m. tomorrow morning. Well, let's go back to Ava and Damien now for their thoughts on what the Qatari Prime Minister had to say, that, Iran and the US should take a step back, that he feels a sense of betrayal when it comes to Iran.
Because Qatar have held, relations with Iran, even when arguably a lot of the world did not want to do so. But the message is very clear there. It's de-escalation. And that's not the sort of talk that we're hearing from Donald Trump or from Israel. And it's certainly not really what we're hearing from the UK government either. As I mentioned before, we are now preparing a warship. We are talking about using various bases. We're going to allow them to be used for, quote unquote, defensive manoeuvres. I mean, whatever that means, that's a rather subjective term. But I think it's a very interesting interview to have at this moment in time, a very interesting moment for perhaps the Prime Minister to consider what those are saying in the region around de-escalation, rather than simply following suit with what President Trump wants.
And Damien, the Prime Minister of Qatar, although saying that feels this sense of betrayal, whose quote is there saying, "We will continue talking to the Iranians, we will continue trying to seek de-escalation." So they're not withdrawing, and then they're certainly not going on the offensive.
No, but I do think if you go back to just where he started, you do get a sense of the tremendous shock and the sense of betrayal and how the country is really acting in self-defence. And so, it was a country that was mediating with Iran. It had reason to believe that there was they were in tandem with Tehran in some ways in terms of the geopolitics of all this, but all that went out the window. And he did specifically say it was really quickly after the US attack started that the first attack came towards Qatar. And the other thing he pointed out, which I thought was interesting, was a quarter of the targets in Qatar itself, and of course the wider region, it has been even more marked, were on civilian targets. And if you look up and down the other side of the Gulf, then there has been a hell of a lot of attacks on them, and they are trying to defend themselves, and they're doing well defending themselves because they've got a lot of systems to try and do that. But Iran has really come after its neighbours in a way that just wasn't expected and is totally unwelcome. And yes, mediation remains obviously Qatar's first option, but it is a very shocked place.
Yeah, and then there have been wider repercussions economically, specifically with Qatar supplying 20% of the world's gas, and that production coming to a complete halt.
Mm-hmm. But also, you know, think about it from a tourist perspective. That region has worked very, very hard over the last 2 decades to sell itself as a very safe place, as a place where you might want to take your children, you might want to relocate. It's a tax haven in the case of the UAE. You know, we're now looking at the prospect of British citizens who have now moved there, might be holidaying there, who are in, you know, real danger, in the prospect of real danger. You've got in Bahrain, there was a desalination, well, what would it be? I don't know. You know, one of those complexes.
Plants, yeah.
Plants,
yeah,
thank you. Was bombed.
Yeah.
You know, that could cut off fresh water to, you know, many people across Riyadh, places where British citizens are. You know, I think that the ramifications for this, which is probably what the Qatari president is pointing towards, is, you know, will be much farther and wider than the initial conflict with which we are currently experiencing.
Yeah, and the whole perception of the region, as you say, particularly places within the UAE, like Dubai, that perception of them being safe and completely safe holiday destinations, I mean, that's out the window now. My own daughter just returned from Dubai, thank God, for this morning.
Yeah.
My niece, who lives there, is now thinking of returning to the UK because she no longer feels safe.
Well, obviously, people are going to be worried. I mean, you know, this is happening. It is something that is still open-ended, so people will be concerned. And, you know, a lot of them didn't go out to the region for that. They went out because they were young professionals, or they were trying to, you know, work in services and take opportunities that somehow they felt weren't here anymore. So, you know, they went out there for a normal and good life, and that's an entirely understandable thing to do, and it's a good thing to do. Now they have to adjust to an almost COVID-style emergency where everything has been, you know, turned upside down, and it's an open-ended thing, and that will obviously be a reason why, for example, the British government is putting on its first charter flight to the UAE specifically next week, early next week, and or this week, and you know, people are anxious. They've got families there. They have ties to here, and you know, it's entirely understandable that they would want to find a safe haven, as it were.
Yeah, so we were talking about the wider repercussions. We just got a little bit of breaking news that crude oil prices have passed $100 a barrel, which is extremely significant. Let's talk a little bit now about the cooperation between the UK and the US, or lack of. And it's unlikely to have been an easy conversation. But this afternoon, 9 days into the war, Sir Keir Starmer and Donald Trump spoke on the phone. It comes amid increasing strain on the special relationship following Donald Trump's criticism of the Prime Minister. Well, let's speak now to Amanda Acas from Downing Street, who's been following this story. Do we know any more about this, what will have been a very awkward conversation, Amanda?
Yes, well, I think that's certainly fair to assume. We know that it took place this afternoon. It lasted around 20 minutes. We do get a brief readout of what they discussed on these calls, although it's never really a huge amount of information. We're told, of course, that they discussed the latest situation in the Middle East. They also talked about cooperation between the British and American military through the use of these RAF bases in the UK and in Diego Garcia in terms of defensive operations to protect regional partners. And we also know that the Prime Minister paid his condolences for the deaths of those American soldiers who have been killed in the conflict. Now, clearly it wouldn't have been the easiest phone call, I think, because we know that Donald Trump is absolutely furious with Sir Keir Starmer for his decision not to allow the US to use those British military bases to mount their initial attack on Iran, although he has since softened that position and is allowing the bases to be used for defensive purposes. And really, there's been a volley of insults from Donald Trump across the Atlantic over the past week, describing the Prime Minister as no Winston Churchill, saying he was disappointed in the UK. Sir Keir Starmer himself making it clear that his government doesn't support the stated aim of the conflict in terms of regime change from the skies, talking about his support for international law. And then last night, we had this absolutely scathing attack from Donald Trump, criticising not just Sir Keir Starmer, but the UK, our former great ally, he put it, rejecting the suggestion of British aircraft carriers going to the Middle East, saying we don't need people that join wars after we've already won. So it will be very interesting to find out more about what exactly was discussed. I think the key thing for Downing Street is that this call did happen because they're very keen to attempt to rebuild the special relationship. And the PM is under a huge amount of pressure over this issue. The Tories are saying that the UK should have supported the US from the beginning in terms of these attacks. Now it's emerged that Tony Blair has also said the UK should have been standing with the US from the beginning. Now that's an interesting perspective, of course. Many in Labour, haunted by what happened in Iraq, probably see it as a benefit in a way to Sir Keir Starmer's position, that he is on the opposite side of this. And certainly he's been very clear in his government. Yvette Cooper speaking this morning to Trevor Phillips on Sky News, making it very clear that this government wants to learn the lessons of the Iraq war. And indeed, there are some who would like him to go a lot further in standing up to Donald Trump. The Liberal Democrats, for example, saying that the UK should call off the state visit of the King to Washington in response to these insults.
Tell us about HMS Dragon and the updates on that heading off to Cyprus.
Yes, so this is the Type 45 destroyer, which is currently stuck in Portsmouth Harbour. The Prime Minister announced last Tuesday it was going to head off to Cyprus to help with the defence of the British military base there, RAF Akrotiri, after it was hit by an Iranian drone. Now, Sky News understands that it will be setting off at the earliest on Tuesday, and then after that it's going to take at least 4 or 5 days to actually get out there to Cyprus. But I think the government will be pleased that finally, at least, there does seem to be some movement. It's been very awkward. They've been under a lot of pressure to get reinforcements to the region. It's been embarrassing. The Cypriot authorities clearly very angry about this, and it's just awkward to see the fact that French, Greek, American ships have been able to get there when the UK hasn't been able to do so. And it's caused a whole debate about military funding and also readiness for this kind of action in the Middle East that have been quite widely signalled in advance, and also a general lack of military defence spending. The Tories have been really leading the way in terms of those attacks, but of course they bear a lot of the responsibility for the reductions in defence spending over the past few years. Now, we understand that it seems that that ship in particular needed to be refitted and resupplied because it had been intended to go off to the high north, but I think the government will be very keen to see it heading out to Portsmouth Harbour this week.
OK, Amanda, for the moment, thank you very much. Well, HMS Dragon, as we heard, off to Cyprus or the earliest Tuesday, we believe. In the meantime, we've had that post from President Trump, haven't we, saying that he doesn't really need the help of the United Kingdom anymore. Our once great ally, maybe the greatest of them all, is finally giving serious thought to sending 2 aircraft carriers to the Middle East. That's OK, Prime Minister Starmer, we don't need them any longer, but we will remember we don't need people that join wars after we've already won. President Donald J. Trump.
It sort of feels a bit like Starmer syndrome, where he can't quite make a decision quick enough or rapidly enough, and then he ends up upsetting both parties who he was looking to appease. And in this situation, he's upset the allies, he's upset Donald Trump and that special relationship. Now, sending that warship, he's potentially upset a lot of his parliamentary Labour Party, who don't want to see an Iraq 2.0, you know, quote unquote. They actually don't want this involvement in the Middle East. So now it sort of feels like Starmer is... Well, actually, I tell you what, the most interesting point here, I think, is about what Tony Blair said behind closed doors about following suit with President Trump and following in hock to America, and that Starmer should have acted a little bit quicker. It's very interesting how sort of war-hungry Tony Blair still seems to be 20 years after the Iraq disaster, particularly in light of the documentary that was released around his involvement in the Middle East just a couple of weeks ago, where he seemed to lament his position. And yet now he's still influencing Starmer to get involved once again. And, you know, you've got people like Jonathan Powell, who's Keir Starmer's national security advisor, who worked throughout Blair's premiership, who is similarly, you know, what we hear, making similar advice to Tony Blair. I just think that perhaps to be fairer to the Labour Parliamentary Party, there needs to sort of be a cooling-off period and a vote that takes place in the House of Commons about whether this is the sort of involvement that not only the country but his MPs want.
Damien, what do you make of Tony Blair's intervention? He's on the front page of The Guardian saying that Starmer should have backed America from the very beginning of its attacks on Iran. Yeah,
I think Keir Starmer will be quietly happy that there does seem to be a bit of water between the two of them. It's something that he can use with the backbenchers and the Labour Party, he will hope. He has, by, I think, allowing the Americans to use the bases, he has put himself on the line on this already. So having an intervention like that he can, I assume he'll come out and say, well, he hasn't done that, so that is just advice or whatever. But I think for Starmer, the issue will be at what point this moves beyond, you know, some embarrassment around President Trump's tweets. I think it's very interesting if you look at what the French are up to. So the French have sent their aircraft carrier to Cyprus. They've sent a destroyer. And President Macron will be there tomorrow, and Keir Starmer won't be there tomorrow. He'll be in London. So I think, you know, you have to be quick. I agree with Eva. You know, in this situation, leaders have to be quick and they have to give the impression that they knew what was going on and they were ahead of it. And I think, on balance, I think Tony Blair's intervention helps because it underlines that he didn't follow what Tony Blair did, you know, 2 decades ago and more. But he's got a hell of a lot of other things that are just showing up the need to be nimble in this situation.
Do you think that there was a little bit of a fight back from Starmer? Because following on from that post from Trump, he did also post the UK needs seriousness, not political games.
I wonder if this is a little bit of backtracking or perhaps saving face. I mean, as I understand it, Starmer, at the initial cabinet meeting when he was speaking to his fellow cabinet ministers, wanted to follow America. He wanted to support Donald Trump. And as I understand it, there was one rather prominent cabinet minister who rallied against him and said, we absolutely, categorically cannot do this. And so there was sort of a bit of pushback. So I think the initial Starmer position was actually to sort of do like the Tony Blair, we must join America and maintain that special relationship. And actually, it's his cabinet ministers who have brought him around the table and said, can you actually think about what the country wants here rather than what you think might be expected of you? And, you know, it's only a few short years ago that Keir Starmer, when he was a QC, was writing newspaper editorials about not invading Iraq, not making unnecessary, you know, interventions into conflicts. It's just very interesting to see the contrast between that person and now this persona who's inherited the Prime Minister's office, because they seem like two dichotomous characters.
And Damien, just very quickly, where does this leave the special relationship? Does it even still exist?
Well, I mean, Donald Trump basically wants to be running the Western Hemisphere, and he's very clear that's his priority. And the European pullback by America feels very real. Britain, I don't think, can hope for a special relationship in the same way as before, because before that was largely about being a bridge to Europe between Washington and all the other capitals. So, in a sense, time had moved on.
OK, Damien and David for the moment, thank you. When we come back, we'll take a first look at what's making the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers. Do stay with us.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is.
First off, just the scale of what we're looking at.
Our data shows it's been happening. Question is why it hasn't been stopped.
You are watching The Wrap. Time now to see what's making the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers. Well, The Times says that Iran has thrown down the gauntlet to President Trump and Israel by announcing that Mujtaba Khamenei will replace his father, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, as the country's new supreme leader. The Telegraph leads with this headline: Defiant Iran turns to Khamenei's son, reporting that the appointment is expected to anger Trump. The Metro also leads on Iran choosing a new supreme leader to replace Ali Khamenei after he was killed in a missile strike, as Donald Trump and Israel warn any successor could also be targeted. As the war enters its second week, tensions are escalating as the US and Israel intensify strikes on Iran and Tehran launches retaliatory attacks across the Gulf, with the Financial Times reporting that Donald Trump dismissed the surge in oil prices as a little glitch. Meanwhile, fears for the global economy after Iran warned it could target oil facilities in neighbouring countries. That's on the front of The Guardian. The Daily Express leads on Keir Starmer being accused of damaging Britain's special relationship with the US after a fresh attack from Donald Trump over delays in allowing American forces to use UK bases during strikes on Iran. The Eye warns that Easter holidays could be at risk as the Middle East conflict spreads, with flights to Cyprus, Dubai and other destinations disrupted by Iranian drone and missile threats, while soaring fuel costs and airspace closures hit travel plans. The Daily Star leads with "Don't shut my great Gandhi's curry house," as a descendant of Mahatma Gandhi joins the campaign to save Britain's first curry house where the iconic leader once dined. Well, should we return to what's happening in the Middle East as we start with the national front page. First of all, Damien's paper, headline there: the goal is to stop aggression against UAE and Gulf states.
Yes, I mean, it won't surprise you that the news has been dominated in the UAE by what is happening and how many attacks have been coming in and the perilous situation across the strait from Iran. Dr. Anwar Gagash is a senior diplomatic figure in the UAE, and he's been talking today about how the state is in a defensive mode, that it is seeking to stop these attacks, and they are a violation of international law, that Iran has decided to be so aggressive against its Arab neighbours, and that the country will do everything it can to ensure that these missiles coming in aren't going to hit home, and you know, they are thwarted. 16 ballistic missiles were destroyed yesterday, and 113 drones, it says here. So, you know, this is really an emergency situation, a true attempt to ensure that people are safe and to use the armoury that the country has to ensure that these weapons, that these attacks by Iran can be stopped.
As you say, Dr. Gargesh, they're talking about a defensive stance, but those remarks come as Israeli media quoting unidentified sources, it has to be said, that the UAE had attacked a desalination plant in Iran.
That was denied by Dr. Gargesh. He said that, you know, the country's transparent about what it's doing to defend itself, and it's not doing that.
Yes, he's saying here that it's all defensive manoeuvres and that it has its right to protect itself as a sovereign nation. Keir Starmer today also had a call with the president of the UAE, in which he sort of reaffirmed his commitment to the UAE. The problem that you've got, though, the problem that Starmer has at the moment, is there are a number of British citizens who are still, quote-unquote, stuck in Dubai. Obviously, the commercial flights have not restarted on the usual timetable. There aren't as many flights as normal, and there's a real panic and a number of British citizens who want to leave. And arguably, the UK response has been rather slow. I think there's only been, I believe it's only one chartered flight by the Foreign Office that has actually taken off. And there are hundreds, if not thousands, of British citizens who are currently there. Huge concern for the UAE, though. I mean, as I've said, 20 minutes ago or so, the UAE has spent a lot of money and a lot of time advertising themselves as a safe haven in the Middle East, attracting people from the West to go and live there or go on holiday there. This would be of immense concern to them if, Iran's attacks on the UAE, because, it's going to discourage tourists. And without tourists, that city will arguably cease to exist.
Damien, meanwhile, front page of the FT, US and Israel intensify strikes on Iran. Tehran responded and still responding. Oil prices, as we've heard breaking news this evening, going above $100 a barrel. Many implications, although Donald Trump dismissing that increase as a little glitch.
Yeah, there are many implications, and of course the key question is, if this is a spike, is it simply a spike? That's something that goes up and then the situation changes and it becomes almost like COVID. If you remember, there was lots and lots of things that were shutting down, and we got through the crisis period, and then things started to get back to normal really quickly. So I think, you can be hopeful and you can try and see that, but what we will see is this spike is going to go up. It says in the FT oil was $90.90 a barrel. You've just said it's gone through $100 a barrel in the Asian markets, and strap yourself in. We are going to see a lot more of this, and being sanguine and trying to say, there is scenarios in which this becomes something that is a phase and then move beyond it and the war somehow resolves, is tough medicine for people when they're seeing their bills start to go up and their holidays disappear and other things.
Front page of The Guardian, though, Ava, we're hearing from Iranian spokesperson for the IRG saying if you can tolerate oil at more than $200 per barrel, continue this game.
I mean, that would be rather extraordinary, wouldn't it? But, over the last week, when it was reported it was $90 a barrel, that was seen as a huge jump. To now reach over $100 a barrel is rather frightening for the global economy. And so, what does President Trump do now for all of those MAGA voters who he promised, that politics would focus only on the domestic, there wouldn't be foreign intervention, and that he was going to get their bills down?
Yeah. Well, he's telling them it's a glitch, isn't he?
Yes, he's saying it's a glitch. And, what does he mean by that? Does this reopen the conflict perhaps with Venezuela? During that period of time when he was seizing Maduro, there was some suggestion that perhaps it was because he wanted some of the Venezuelan oil. California and Texas are producing swathes of oil. They're now, the US is now selling oil when it previously wasn't before. But Venezuela has, the oil that it would typically buy from the Middle East. So does this reopen another conflict, is the question.
Yeah, it's a very big question which nobody has the answer to at the moment. Ava and Damien, thank you very much for the minute. Coming up in the sport next, a day of upsets in the FA Cup.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
I'll take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is.
First off, just the scale of what we're looking at.
Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.
I witnessed the complete destruction of a place linked to my childhood memories. This is insane. I'm Yusra Al-Bagher, Sky's Africa correspondent based in Johannesburg, South Africa. I felt awe when we saw the mountain gorillas in Rwanda.
We call him the king of the jungle. This is the alpha silverback.
Sky News, get the full story first.
Okay, there's a lot of firing going on.
Can you explain to me why? We're journalists, sir.
Let's go. Watch, wait, right, we're going to get in. Right, get in. Get in.
We just want to ask you a few questions about your involvement with ISIS. The next step for them quite often is getting on a boat and sailing illegally over into Europe.
Es un solo procesamiento, una sola sacada.
Whoa. Whoa. Oh my goodness. Whoa. Oh my goodness. If you weren't affected, you'd be a bit of a strange person.
Turn off the camera, turn around and go away.
Okay, but
listen, I told you 3 times.
They saw 2 guys, 2 bad people.
There's an absolutely packed dinghy.
That is what it's like. Sometimes you have to put in an awful lot of hard work. It's worth doing. I suppose it is what we do.
I'm Tom Cheshire, Sky's data and forensics correspondent. We gather, analyse and visualise data to tell data-driven stories.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
We've done the work and the reading, so you don't have to.
Being a Sky News presenter.
Hello and welcome. Westminster, the heart of British politics.
I'm so sorry about what happened to you.
So what on earth is going on?
it's not true.
Can I tell you what I think? It's really unusual. Mornings with Richard and Frost. Let's crack on. Let's get started.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist.
A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan had the right to respond.
You're like, what?
A historic day here today.
Congratulations, this is a huge moment.
But what happens now?
Time now to get all the very latest sports news with Roger.
Good afternoon.
I'm sure all the Arsenal fans would want to know how much ammunition are you going to give Arsene Wenger to find. It'll be enough.
Arsene wanted certain players to come in, and meanwhile he wasn't really the manager yet.
I went a few times to watch Khan play, and I asked after the game, who is this guy?
Patrick was top of his list.
He was telling me that he was on his way to Arsenal, and I said, listen, you're going anywhere, I'll follow you.
He was going to join Ajax, and in fact I think Bayern Munich were also in for him at the time.
I spent 3 days in Amsterdam.
So we had hijack it.
His agents called me, tell him to take the plane to fly to London.
We were breaking the mould. We had to rely on Arsene's judgment.
Adding a continental touch to Arsenal's never-say-die style is what Wenger is promising.
Quand je suis venu, je veux dire, il y a tout ce qu'il faut pour être un grand club. Je veux dire, ils ont un public qui est fabuleux.
I believe he has a great future. At the time, English players were dominant. It was a risk, yes, when we bought foreign players.
He knew what I was missing to go to the top.
We weren't used to this at Arsenal. We were very British. It was like, who are all these French guys?
Steve Bold turned around with his tray full of beers. I just remember Patrick Facegood Square.
He was special. How they see Milan got rid of him.
Quite literally unbeatable.
Captain of the Invincibles.
You don't get a better legacy than that.
It was one of the greatest bargains in the history of Premier League transfers. Patrick Vieira, £3.5 million.
He should have a statue, in my opinion.
Everybody realised that guy could change the destiny of Arsenal Football Club.
The rest is history.
Can
at the time had one of the best academies in the country. I mean, Zidane is obviously the other outstanding one to come out of there. And for him to start at 17, for a team like Cannes, who at that time was playing top 7, top 8 in France, and yeah, he was the best player on that team, pretty much. For us, in France, he was very, very highly rated.
I was coach in Monaco, and it was an end-of-season game. We played a kind of League Cup at the end of the season. He played with Cannes, and I asked after the game, who is this guy? He won the challenge. He dominated the midfield. After the game, I said to my assistant, I've seen a great player today.
He was tall, he was strong, he was so determined, he was hard on people, but he could move the ball so well. He had everything. There was no doubt he was destined for great things.
I went a few times to watch Cannes play. He had that presence, that he was quite complete player defensively and offensively. It was always difficult to buy the players from Cannes to Monaco. And I thought I would try to get him to come to Monaco.
He was the next big thing. That's why AC Milan, who had a long history of obviously French players within their squad, signed him so young.
He moved straight away to Milan, so that was the level above. But at the time, Milan was one of the dominating teams in Europe. So he went straight, without any intermediate step, straight away to the top clubs.
There's two ways to go to Italy at this time. Or like me as a champion, you know, you play already on a big club. And after you have the second wave from French players coming very young, very successful, like Patrick or Thierry Henry has the same with Juventus. And it's tough, because Italy, they don't care about you if you are a young player. And you don't have so many chances to play. And Italy is a tough time. Even when you play, it's a tough time.
Italy and this Milan team at the time was maybe not the right call for him. Him hardly playing there kind of slowed everything down. And we're like, okay, maybe he was not as good as we thought.
It was important for me to make the move. I knew that I had a chance to go to the World Cup '98 in France. So it was important for me to find a team, find a club where I can go and play week in and week out.
Rioch's departure, only just before the season starts, is a shock to say the least.
Angry fans claim the soul has been ripped out of the Arsenal.
It was perhaps a slight breakdown in communication between him and the board, I think, was what.
Thanks, Roger. Let's take a look at the weather for you now.
You're looking happy.
Well, the forecast looks good.
So you've sorted the travel insurance then?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors Sky News Weather.
Well, it's looking mostly dry and calm again tomorrow, if gloomy, but it'll turn more unsettled from Tuesday. There'll be another mostly mild but rather murky start, with extensive low cloud, hill fog and outbreaks of rain or drizzle. The rain will be concentrated over western Britain and southwestern Irish coasts. The morning looks like staying rather dull again, with further patchy rain, mostly over western Britain, but there's a greater chance of some brighter spells developing. Eastern Britain and the west of Ireland look most favoured. It'll be very mild generally, with mainly light winds. The afternoon will stay mostly dry, with brighter spells developing more widely, but England and Wales will see showery outbreaks becoming a little more widespread.
All Clear Travel Insurance proudly sponsors Sky News Weather.
When we come back, more about the announcement of Iran's new supreme leader. Stay with us.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is.
First off, just the scale of what we're looking at.
Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist. A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan had the right to respond.
You're like, what?
Historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now?
Tonight on The Wrap, Iran has a new supreme leader. Mojtaba Khamenei is to be the new ruler of the country, taking over from his father, who was killed on the first day of the conflict. Also tonight, in an exclusive interview with Sky News, the Qatari Prime Minister calls for a de-escalation of the war and says he feels a deep sense of betrayal from the Iranian attacks on his country.
This miscalculation by the Iranians to attack the Gulf countries has destroyed everything.
Heavy explosions are heard across Tehran and oil refineries are hit as the bombing campaign escalates. Keir Starmer spoke today to Donald Trump for the first time since the war started 8 days ago, and following this social media volley from the US president, who said he doesn't need the UK any longer. We discuss the day's biggest stories with London bureau chief of The National, Damien McElroy, and political editor at Politics Joe Ava Santina Evans. Plus, a first look at the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers, including this headline from The Times: Ayatollah's son chosen in challenge to Trump. Good evening. Iran has announced that Mojtaba Khamenei, the son of the late Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, has been named as his successor. His father was killed on the first day of the war when his compound was flattened. The news was met with celebrations by government supporters in Tehran. but the new leader faces a test, with Israel promising to target him. Well, Damien and Ava are here now this evening to take us through the proceedings and your thoughts, first of all, Ava, on the appointment of this new Supreme Leader.
Well, last night Trump jibed that the war was almost certainly over, or perhaps nearly over. This appointment of the Ayatollah's son, who Donald Trump has said that appointment previously would be unacceptable, proves that the war is nowhere near over.
Damien?
I think it proves the hardliners are still in control of the system, that there is not a spirit of compromise or seeking a way out yet in place. And so I think it means the war will probably intensify again.
Yes, we shall see on that front, despite Donald Trump saying that it could be over in a very short period of time. Well, let's hear now from Alistair Bunkle on Iran's new Supreme Leader.
Mojtaba Khamenei has been officially named as Iran's new Supreme Leader, only the third in the country's history. But who is he, and why might his appointment be controversial? Here are 4 things that I think you need to know about him. Mojtaba is the 56-year-old son of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, the former Supreme Leader who was killed in his compound in Tehran on the first day of the war. Mojtaba wasn't there, he survived, but his mother, wife and daughter were all killed. So he takes over from his father, in effect creating a dynasty, a bit like a monarchy. But Iranians don't like dynasties. They overthrew the Qatar dynasty in 1925 and then the Pahlavi monarchy in 1979. The position of the Supreme Leader is not just the ultimate authority in Iran. He, and it is always a man, is the guardian of the Islamic Republic. But Mojtaba Khamenei has only ever been a mid-ranking cleric, not a senior Ayatollah. The only reason, perhaps, that he's been appointed is because of his surname, Khamenei. And that is another reason to question his credentials for the role of Supreme Leader. Little is known about Mojtaba Khamenei. He's generally kept a low profile, but he did serve in the Revolutionary Guard during the Iran-Iraq War in the 1980s, building up valuable connections, and he has been linked with the violent suppression of protests in Iran over the years. Unlike his father, though, who was a well-known intellectual, a strong orator with a following inside Iran before he became Supreme Leader, Mojtaba does not have a strong reputation inside the country. And fourthly, Mojtaba has never held public office or been elected into anything. But he is close to the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, and that is important because they would have been instrumental in his appointment. And it suggests that the hardliners retain some power in Iran, and that does not bode well for any negotiations to end the war.
Well, I spoke to our US correspondent James Matthews a short while ago and began by asking him whether we would be right in thinking that Donald Trump would not be in approval of the new appointment of the Supreme Leader.
He made that abundantly clear, calling him acceptable. He said this to Axios of Mojtaba Khamenei just a few days ago. They are wasting their time. Khamenei's son is a lightweight. I have to be involved in the appointment, he said, like with Delcy Rodriguez in Venezuela. And he added that he would refuse to accept a new Iranian leader who would continue with Khamenei's policies. He said that would simply force the United States to go back to war in 5 years. So he's already discounted this individual. I suppose much depends on what we hear from Khamenei when he makes some kind of public statement, something of a mysterious character. Iranians don't hear much from him, but it remains to be seen how different he is, if at all, from his father. He's very much cut from the same cloth. All the discussion is that he is at least as hardline as his father was, you know, embedded in the IRGC and so on. And of course, part of a regime, a system that is multi-layered with a consistent ideology running through it. So how this squares with Donald Trump's justification for this conflict, and bear in mind that seems to change on a regular basis, remains to be seen, and it is a serious test of Donald Trump, because if the new man is seen to be the same as the old man, then it does beg the question, you know, what's changed? Why did we go to war in the first place? And it has to be far-fetched, the notion that this will be a man who will do Donald Trump spitting. He said something else to ABC today, Gillian. He was asked, would he approve of somebody connected to the old regime? His answer was, I would, in order to choose a good leader. So, who knows, perhaps some room for manoeuvre there, but, you know, Khamenei is very much connected to the old regime, not necessarily a good leader as Donald Trump would see it. We know that because he told us as much a few days ago.
Well, let's take a look now at the reaction in the room in Iran when the announcement of the new supreme leader was made. Let's take a look. So seemingly pretty positive there. They looked like that was the result that they were looking for. But as we've heard from Donald Trump, he considers him, Mujtaba, a complete lightweight.
Well, you know, and a hardliner, and someone who would not be an acceptable choice for America. I mean, which also is rather amusing, because what on earth, why would it be America's choice anyway about who was appointed? But, you know, this is the sort of the lessons that came out of the Chilcot inquiry, into the Iraq War, around deposing a new leader before there is a plan about who will replace that and what, you know, regime or government will follow. What's happened here is you've removed one person to replace him with someone who's arguably, well, we don't know very much about him, but if he's his son, probably rather similar. This will not please President Trump this evening, I highly doubt it.
No, and he's saying that he'll refuse to accept anyone as leader who will follow on the policies of Ali Khamenei.
Yeah. And, you know, in one way this is a surprise, and in another way it isn't a surprise because it's been talked about for many years. The surprise bit is that they're going for the son of the last guy, and as Alistair said, that's a dynastic system in the working itself out. So it does... Which is
something Iranians have rejected.
Exactly. So it is actually a sign of weakness of the leadership clique that they are going down this path, that they're pre-programmed almost already to do that. And there are other powerful players in the Iranian system, people like Ali Larijani, the head of security, who are lurking in the background and have been willing to say that what direction they think the country should be going in at this stage, which counts as breaking cover in Iran. So it's not... It may be welcomed, there may be people, you know, cheering for it, but I suspect it's not the end of the story.
No, I suspect you're right. Damien, front page of the Telegraph, defiant Iran turns to Khamenei's son. And this does seemingly appear to be absolute defiance, especially as we've heard from Donald Trump saying that he will not accept a leader that follows on with the same policies. But what does that mean?
Well, arguably means, sorry, lost me for words there, because arguably it means a further escalation, you know, putting in a hardliner. This is not something that President Trump wants. But, you know, I imagine that, you know, Israel might be rather pleased with this appointment if it displeases the president, because it will mean that the US will perhaps stay in lieu or in step with Israel. Netanyahu has different motivations than President Trump when it comes to the destruction of Iran, but anything that keeps America involved in this stage of the conflict, I'm sure, will be received well by Netanyahu.
And we've already heard from Israel that the new supreme leader is, at this very minute, a target.
Well, I think he will be a marked man. I don't think there's any other way around that. The question is, though, do we see Iran widening its response as well? So things are going to get rougher in the way that Iran is fighting back, and that really does go down a kind of dead-ender approach, and that would be very destabilising as well. So, you know, it's a system that is in the throes of crisis, and this is another symptom of that.
Yeah, and it does seem to be leaning in one direction and then moving all the way back in the other direction, because we've heard from the Iranian president, who has said that they will be stepping up attacks on US targets in the Middle East. But previously, he was apologising for the attacks on their neighbours.
Certainly. I mean, this is what we heard from the Qatari Prime Minister, excuse me, President? Prime Minister.
Prime Minister.
Sorry, it's late. This is what we heard in your interview earlier today. There's a real call for de-escalation from the Gulf states. And it did seem at one point that Iran was sort of acquiescing to that. There was this apology. And now it seems to have totally flipped. But even what the messages that we're getting from the Americans seem very confused. We had Mike Katz, who was talking I think it was yesterday, talking about depleting stock of the Iranians. That now seems not to be true at all. We've seen a further escalation of attacks using ballistic missiles. We've heard about new drones that are being operated. So it doesn't quite feel that we're getting the sort of the clear picture of what really is happening in this conflict. But I think it would be fair to say that what's going to happen over the next couple of days will be an escalation.
We're in an escalation phase right now, aren't we? We've seen the attacks on Iran, the infrastructure that's been targeted by Israel.
Yeah. I mean, this is a war that President Trump launched knowing that all his predecessors had decided not to because, frankly, it would be too messy and the Iranian response would be sort of ugly around it and within tumultuous, if not pitching the country into turmoil. So we're looking down the barrel of that right now, and if there is a point at which the system cracks, we can't quite see it yet.
I want to return to the situation in the Middle East, but just want to bring you some breaking news, domestic news first of all, and that is that train passengers facing major disruption after a fire broke out near Glasgow Central Railway Station. Very dramatic pictures there. Dozens of trains have been cancelled tonight following the blaze at a building in Union Street. National Rail said the station will be closed until further notice, completely engulfed by flames there. That building, of course, keep you updated on the situation throughout the evening. The Prime Minister of Qatar has made an urgent plea for all sides in the war to de-escalate. He spoke exclusively to my colleague Yalda Hakim. Let's hear part of that interview now.
Sheikh Mohammed, it's very good to see you. We're here in your office in Doha, where you've been dealing with ballistic missiles, you've been dealing with drone strikes from Iran. Just how difficult a period has this been for Qatar?
Well, unfortunately, it's been like a very difficult period for the entire country, but we have our defense and security personnel has been doing a great job in defending the country and its people, citizens, visitors, and residents who are here. Of course, these attacks on the Gulf countries in general, plus Jordan, Turkey, Azerbaijan, we never expected this to come to us from our neighbor. We were always building this relationship in preserving the good neighborhood and relationship in a good faith with Iran. Unfortunately, there are some justifications and pretexts that they've been using to justify these attacks on the state of Qatar and the other countries, which is totally rejected, and no one will be able even to justify them.
You just mentioned there that you have always tried to maintain diplomatic relations with Iran. Certainly Qatar has, and they've tried in many ways to maintain those relationships despite Iran facing global isolation. Do you feel betrayed?
Well, of course, it is a big sense of betrayal. This is the second time. That's why it's also for us, it's been something really significant to see the attack, which was showing that being pre-planned. Once the war started, just maybe an hour after the start of the war, Qatar and the other Gulf countries being attacked right away. And all of us before this war, and repeatedly we've been saying and repeating that we are not going to take part of any attacks or any wars against our neighbors. We would like to see a peaceful neighborhood. We were helping Iran and the United States in reaching diplomatic solutions. But this miscalculation by the Iranians to attack the Gulf countries has destroyed everything. Our countries don't want to be part of this war, and we would like to see them stopping right away.
As you say, a disaster for the world. It's not just about the region.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, we have seen what are the cascading effects of this escalation, and we are just a week from this conflict. And it's we need to ensure first that Iran should stop all the attacks against the Gulf countries and the other countries that they are attacking, and they are not party of this war. We need to seek a way to de-escalate the situation and to find diplomatic solution whenever it's possible.
And a reminder that you can watch Yalda's full interview with Qatar's Prime Minister on all Sky News platforms from 7 a.m. tomorrow morning. I might have inadvertently said that you could get up and see it an hour earlier, but it is 7 a.m. So the Qatari Prime Minister there suggesting that he believes Iran might have miscalculated when they decided to hit their neighbours in the way that they have.
Yes, what you saw there was the shock and anger of Qatar, and indeed it's shared by its neighbours around the Gulf. There is a real sense that Iran has come after its neighbours in a way that is illegitimate. It's not legal under international law, for example, and that in Qatar's case, where it had spent so long, so carefully positioned between Iran and America, and it had made so many efforts at mediation with the Iranians, that they are still pleading for the Iranians to engage. But really, the palpable sense that 1/4 of the attacks by Iran on Qatar alone are on civilian targets, and then you look at the other countries along the coastline, and you see a real kind of barrage of Iranian attacks, which is really against the spirit of all the diplomacy they had tried to do with the Iranians for years.
Yeah, but as Damien is saying, Qatar are still willing to negotiate. They're still wanting to enter into talks with Iran and continuing to seek de-escalation despite being under attack.
But that came with a warning and almost a caveat, which is if Iran continues, we will not be able to mediate between yourselves and the US. You're going to have to go it alone, because we'll be focusing on protecting ourselves rather than looking at mediating conversations between, yourself and potentially President Trump. But, Qatar have always been very friendly with Iran, even at times when the rest of the world were not in the place of engaging in conversation with them. So, I think you could really sort of feel the palpable shock there from the Prime Minister that this conflict was ongoing. I think when he said it was unexpected, I think there's actually quite a lot of weight in that particular word.
And the ramifications across the board in that region are wide and varied, not least of which is the effect on the economy. Qatar being a gas supplier, 20% of the world's gas comes from there. That supply is now at a halt, which is going to have repercussions not just across the region, but for us here and the rest of the world.
Yeah, I mean, we read that Britain, for example, is days away from using up its gas supplies, so it's very exposed, and it would, if it wants to bolster those beyond it gets a lot of supplies from America, but if it wants to bolster those storage reserves, then it has to go into the spot market, and we're watching 20% rises in a few minutes at the moment in the Asian market. So, yeah, the cloud of where this actually starts mattering to people is coming very close now.
Since we've been on air, Ava, it's gone from $100 a barrel, which is considered the extremely high benchmark, to 120, while we've been speaking.
Yes, and there was, there was one line in one of the papers that said that the barrel could reach $200, and we sort of almost scoffed at that.
Yeah.
And then over the course of an hour, it has raised by $20. So perhaps there might be some credence to that claim. But this is the problem. This is where it gets very tricky for Keir Starmer. We've just seen energy bills were just reduced for the next couple of months. Perhaps that was an early calculation. It really speaks to the volatility of the energy market. And this is something that, Ed Miliband has been talking about since he rejoined the government a couple of years ago, around, making the UK stable, making the UK independent when it comes to their energy, so you don't have these enormous price shocks, which inevitably, that's when people start paying attention, is when they realise that their bills are astronomical and much higher than they had been before.
But it's impossible to be entirely self-sufficient, though, isn't it, Damien?
It is. I mean, Ed Miliband himself talks about how production here would fit into the international market, the international price. And I don't think that, the international price is going to do anything other than what it is doing. But, the country is also in changing circumstances. And I think people will want to see a signal on the North Sea. And whether politically the government could take that choice or not, I don't know. But since they are prioritising the cost of living right now, and that was going to be a big plank over the next few months for Keir Starmer, he's really going to be caught in a pincher movement over this.
It'd be suicidal if Labour did that. But, you look at someone like Nigel Farage, who's been arguing around the benefits of fracking and reopening, drilling in the North Sea. This could be a huge political win for him, particularly coming up to the May elections, if he's travelling around the country, particularly if you look at Wales. This is an argument that he could make there that would resound.
Shall we take a break? When we come back, we'll take a look at the risk the war is creating to the special relationship between the UK and the US. Do stay with us.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
We've done the work and the reading, so you don't have to.
Being a Sky News presenter.
Hello and welcome. Westminster, the heart of British politics.
I'm so sorry about what happened to you.
So what on earth is going on?
It's not true.
Can I tell you what I think? It's really unusual. Mornings with Richard and Frost.
Let's crack on. Let's get started.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
being a Sky News journalist?
A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan had the right to respond.
You're like, what?
Historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now?
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
They call him the king of the jungle.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Yusra al-Baghir has this report.
And this is what's left of it.
As a woman of colour, how did the Harris campaign speak to you?
People risk their lives to speak to us for this report.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
Just want to recap on that breaking news we brought you some moments ago, and that is the inferno now at this building in Scotland. We know that train passengers are facing major disruption after fire broke out. This is near Glasgow Central Railway Station. Trains have been cancelled, dozens of trains cancelled after this blaze in Union Street. We're now hearing that the building has now partially collapsed. These aren't live pictures, but we brought them to you from earlier on. But apparently now the building has now collapsed. The Labour MSP for Glasgow said, sadly, the building has now partially collapsed. I hope the fire can be contained. The corner of the Forsyth building, as well as the Caledonian Chambers and Central Hotel, seem unaffected. It's a massive blow to Union Street, with the restoration of the Egyptian halls in prospect. So dozens of trains cancelled, and as you can see from the pictures, a pretty spectacular fire. I think we can describe it as an inferno, as that building goes up in flames and has partially collapsed. We'll keep you updated on the situation there near Glasgow Central Station throughout the course of the evening. Now, it's unlikely to have been an easy conversation, but this afternoon, 9 days into the war, Sir Keir Starmer and Donald Trump spoke on the phone. It comes amid increasing strain on the special relationship following Donald Trump's criticism of the Prime Minister. It was the first time the pair had spoken since their conversation on the first day of the war. So still with us, taking us through the papers and discussing all of the themes this evening, Damien and Ava. Where does the special relationship stand now, Damien, do you think?
Well, it's looking pretty ragged, isn't it? Keir Starmer set out to try and get a handle on how the Trump administration was going to work, and he had Peter Mandelson out there for a while, and we won't go back over all that. But right now, it looks like the war in Iran has exposed just how the two sides are operating differently now. And Starmer took a legalistic approach initially to how he was going to deal with the war in Iran. That quickly got exposed by the fact that Iran was firing back, and that there was a need to defend the neighbours of Iran, and therefore Britain needed to basically go to those countries where it's had a long-standing alliance and relationship. And like with Qatar and the Qatar Prime Minister, Britain is providing fighter jets to try and defend against the missiles coming in. But with Donald Trump, he's got a real problem, because Donald Trump wanted one answer very quickly, and he didn't get that, and he's not going to let that go.
He's saying too little, too late. They don't need the help of allies like that anymore. And we've had the intervention from Tony Blair also, saying that Sir Keir Starmer should have backed the US straight away from day one.
Yes, in a conversation that was apparently meant to be sort of Chatham House rules or secret. He had said that to maintain that special relationship, you should always follow your ally. Starmer should have followed his ally. The tricky thing here now, though, is that, Starmer seems to be on the back foot, because there was a very compelling argument that he could have made at the beginning of this conflict, which was UK bases cannot be used for an attack on Iran. You know, if Iran had retaliated and attacked one of the UK's allies, it would have been totally reasonable and totally legal to utilise British bases. But for some reason, Starmer couldn't quite articulate that. So what it sort of seems, the public perception of Starmer in this moment is that he's just a little bit slow, that he's a little bit stagnant, and he seems to be on the back foot when it comes to this conflict. You know, if the Prime Minister is going to make a decisive decision, such as the US cannot use our bases, perhaps he needs to be more forthright in explaining the reasons behind that. Otherwise, he just looks a little bit slow.
Daily Express describing him as incompetent. Damien, would you go that far, or is it that more that he's been indecisive and has, you know, vacillated on his view?
I think the real truth, I mean, incompetent is a jibe from an opposition MP there. I think the real truth is Keir Starmer is exposed politically because of the polls and how the Labour Party has a sort of low-level rebellion that occasionally comes up to the surface. And the moves he made were, I think, largely dictated by that was the room for manoeuvre he had with the Labour Party. And at the minute, actually, I think he's probably got enough of the party on side right now. So actually, Donald Trump and his salvos is one thing, but the party is probably sticking with him for now on this.
But there is criticism within the party, not just within...
there are people vigilant about his position.
Yeah. And not just within his party.
If it goes to the Chamber, if it goes to the House of Commons, like we saw last week, the number of Labour MPs who stood up to voice their concern to Keir Starmer, this is not a good look for him, particularly at a moment where his leadership is rather fragile because of the sort of disastrous polling and disastrous by-election result of the week just passed. You know, if your party is out of kilter with the leadership, it just doesn't bode well. The argument that's being made over and over again by these backbench Labour MPs is that they don't want to have the current special relationship that we have with America, the current makeup of that. You know, I was speaking to one MP a couple of days ago, and what they were saying to me was that we always look like America's poodle. You know, Trump says jump and we say how high. That wasn't, in their opinion, the original conception of what the special relationship should look like. It should look like a partnership rather than we have, Donald Trump has an idea and then we have the money and facilities to facilitate that idea, no matter how grandiose or ridiculous that idea might seem to the Prime Minister incumbent. So perhaps, you know, there needs to be these difficult conversations behind closed doors of what actually should that special relationship look like, and are we, the UK, actually getting what we want from it?
And as we say, not just criticism within his party, but elsewhere in the House, and the Liberal Democrat leader, Ed Davey, has called on the Prime Minister to cancel the King's scheduled state visit to the US in April, saying a state visit from our King would be seen as yet another huge diplomatic coup for President Trump. So it should not be given to someone who repeatedly insults and damages our country. Quite stark words there. Well, some of the criticism from Washington has been because of a perceived lack of urgency from Downing Street. Sky News understands that the British warship HMS Dragon will now leave for Cyprus as early as Tuesday. Damien, your thoughts there on Ed Davey's words? I mean, they do seem quite harsh, and he's particularly calling for the state visit to be cancelled. We know that the state visit of Donald Trump was something that Keir Starmer had in his top pocket, and we all saw him bring out that invitation in the White House, and that was his kind of trump card, forgive the pun. But now if we see this return visit of the King cancelled, that's going to really annoy Donald Trump.
Yes, there's no doubt that would be a hugely damaging thing that would be talked about for weeks. And so instead of the King or other members of the royal family being a Trump whisperer, Britain would be even more exposed to a backlash from the president. You'd also actually lose something quite symbolic, which is the King going to mark 250 years of America. So it would actually be a real thing. But none of us know by April where we will be in terms of what's happening with the war in Iran, and just what the public atmosphere will be around that, and if the visit will therefore actually be feasible on its own terms.
Do you think it should be cancelled, Ava?
Ed Davies positioned himself as sort of the anti-Trump party leader over the last year or so. He's also been very vocal about people like Elon Musk, the owner of the social media site X. And he's sort of followed this line of, Britain should reassess our relationship with that particular president because it's not beneficial, it doesn't match with our values or align with our values, and we shouldn't be in hock to him. I don't know if a state visit should go ahead, to be honest. In my opinion, I don't think that the card should have ever been dangled, or the carrot should have ever been dangled in the front of Trump in the first place. You've got this sort of arguably apolitical figure, which is the king, who is being used as a bargaining chip. And, whatever you think about that morally, I just think it makes us look rather cheap on the world stage, if we sort of have to use that card.
But it got results, though, didn't it? We got lower tariffs than anybody else.
Did it? Because we still got 10%
Well, in the end,
tariffs.
they changed again, yes. So.
And they changed again, and, this was all argued, Trump changes his mind every single day or every single moment. Just because in that Oval Office that one time he looked rather pleased with Keir Starmer, it doesn't mean he didn't leave, order a Diet Coke and then talk about what a fool he is. He's so fair weather that you can't rely on each single interaction with him.
No, that's true. Said to always listen to the last person that he's spoken to. That's his view until he speaks to somebody else. Let's take a look now at what's making the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers. Well, The Times says that Iran has thrown down the gauntlet to President Trump and Israel by announcing that Mojtaba Khamenei will replace his father, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, as the country's new supreme leader. The Telegraph leads with this headline: Defiant Iran turns to Khamenei's son, reporting that the appointment is expected to anger Trump. The Metro also leads on Iran choosing a new supreme leader to replace Ali Khamenei after he was killed in a missile strike, as Donald Trump and Israel warn any successor could also be targeted. As the war enters its second week, tensions are escalating as the US and Israel intensify strikes on Iran and Tehran launches retaliatory attacks across the Gulf, with the Financial Times reporting that Donald Trump dismissed the surge in oil prices as a little glitch. Meanwhile, fears for the global economy after Iran warned it could target oil facilities in neighbouring countries. That's on the front of The Guardian. The Daily Express leads on Keir Starmer being accused of damaging Britain's special relationship with the US after a fresh attack from Donald Trump over delays in allowing American forces to use UK bases during strikes on Iran. The Daily Mail also focuses on talks between Sir Keir Starmer and Donald Trump to repair the special relationship. The Eye warns that Easter holidays could be at risk as the Middle East war spreads, with flights to Cyprus, Dubai and other destinations disrupted by Iranian drone and missile threats, while soaring fuel costs and airspace closures hit travel plans. The Daily Star leads with Don't Shut My Great Gandhi's Curry House, as a descendant of Mahatma Gandhi joins the campaign to save Britain's first curry house, where the iconic leader apparently once dined. Well, let's go straight into the papers. Ava, take us into the Metro, page 2 of the Metro there, and that headline that Starmer, we have to call it out when world leaders...
Spew misogyny.
Yes, spew misogyny. Sorry, I thought we were looking at a different story entirely. Yes, that's the one. Take us into this story.
Yes, so he's sort of Keir Starmer here having his Hugh Grant in Love Actually moment. So he'd invited a number of women to Downing Street today. He spoke to them about his personal mission to tackle violence against women and girls, and that, it's one that is extraordinarily important to him. He spoke about his wife. His wife actually spoke at this event, and he spoke about his children, and he said that this was one of his foremost missions. But we have to call it out when world leaders spew misogyny. It's sort of an interesting line for Keir Starmer to give at this moment. We look at what's just happened in Iran. We look at those joint US and Israeli strikes on a girls' school. Just a couple of days ago, over 100 young girls were killed during one of those strikes. Do you think that perhaps that is one of the moments that he should call out? Because, you know, I would say that perhaps if you were very serious about violence against women and girls, then perhaps you would use that as an example and perhaps start there.
Damien, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think Keir Starmer has obviously offered a kind of personal involvement in this in a way that, you know, he's using the power of the Prime Minister's office to do this. And, you know, there are many outstanding issues that particularly affect women that his government needs to be tackling, you know, especially in the social media sphere, for example, or in inequality and stuff. And so I think by being able to embrace this day and to come out and give people recognition for how they are fighting, does actually recognise that there are particular issues that women face that do need to be tackled as an issue of protecting and enabling women properly. And, you know, it can only be a good thing that he's on this agenda.
Indeed. We're going to take a break, but just want to recap on the breaking news that we brought you a short while ago, and that is that the fire that has broken out near Glasgow Central Railway Station. We're hearing now via the Labour MSP for Glasgow, Paul Sweeney, that the building has now partially collapsed. It's a massive blow to Union Street with the restoration of the Egyptian halls in prospect. He's quoted as saying, as you can see, a major incident there now resulting in the collapse, near collapse of the building. Dozens of trains have been cancelled as they continue to tackle the blaze there in Union Street. We'll update you on that throughout the course of the evening.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
I'll take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is.
First off, just the scale of what we're looking at.
Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.
You are watching The Wrap. Ava and Damien still taking us through the newspapers. We're going to have a look at the page 16, and the headline there, Mandelson can keep peerage until at least May. Why, Ava?
Legislation, apparently. Legislation that the 2024 Labour Party manifesto promised to throw out. So, you know, in that manifesto, there was rather heavy intervention. I would say it probably had come from Gordon Brown at the time about reinvigorating the House of Lords, meaning that hereditary peerages wouldn't necessarily entitle you to a seat in the House of Lords. And also, if you had been found to have behaved poorly, you would no longer be allowed to sit in the upper chamber. But it seems that the current legislation means that Peter Mandelson can hold on to that peerage until at least May. And I imagine this would be, you know, had not what had happened in Iran escalated over the course of the day, I imagine that would have been front-page news, because this is something that would really infuriate the British public. Why on earth is this man, you know, hypothetically, he could go into the House of Lords tomorrow and claim £300 just for turning up. I mean, in what world is that fair?
The laws obviously won't be introduced before May, but you can understand the fury of the public that is not stripped immediately.
Yes, it's just another place where, by delaying, you create this vulnerability that the people get angry, that it's pointed out, that it's exposed again, and you just keep this whole sorry, you know, saga kind of rumbling on in big ways and small, and that's the last thing the government needs.
Take us to the Times, Ava. Keir Starmer has been sent a letter by Labour MPs calling on the UK to pay reparations to Palestine for war crimes they allege British forces committed. Yes. So this is a number of backbench Labour MPs who are talking about the intervention made by, well, they describe it as an intervention made by Britain. So this is what they're sort of signalling is the arms that were supplied to Israel, or the arms licences that weren't halted, leaves Keir Starmer culpable for what some of the crimes that have been committed in Gaza. But there's also actually a simultaneous letter. Sorry, I stumbled at the beginning because I was trying to work out which one was which. There's another letter that's actually going to be coordinated by a larger number of MPs, and it's crossbench. It's on similar lines, and it's also calling on the Prime Minister to describe them as war crimes, which Keir Starmer has been rather shy to do. And suggesting that the UK has breached international law, Damien.
Yes, and there's the outstanding issue of how the UK responds to the ICJ, the UN court ruling about how Israel prosecuted the whole war in Gaza. So, you know, there's a lot of frustration among the Labour ranks and other MPs as well. And the government does seem quite frozen by its inability to jump one way or another on this issue.
Damien and Ava, thank you so much for taking us through the newspapers this evening. Let's just recap on the breaking news that we brought you a short time ago, and that is that train passengers are facing major disruption after this fire that we're showing you broke out near Glasgow Central Railway Station. Dozens of trains have been cancelled tonight, and we have had an update with the Labour MSP for Glasgow, Paul Sweeney, saying that the building has now partially collapsed. So it is, the pictures that we're showing you show an inferno and a huge incident taking place there at the Glasgow Central Railway Station, the building on Union Street, up in flames and partially collapsed as we speak. We'll, of course, keep you updated throughout the course of the evening as to the state of the building and the work of emergency services. But time now to get the latest sports news with Roger.
Patrick, could you just clap your hands?
Good afternoon.
I'm sure all the Arsenal fans would want to know how much ammunition are you going to give Arsene Wenger to fire. It'll be enough.
Arsene wanted certain players to come in, and meanwhile he wasn't really the manager yet.
I went a few times to watch Khan play, and I asked after the game, who is this guy?
Patrick was top of his list.
He was telling me that he was on his way to Arsenal, and I said, listen, you're going anywhere, I'll follow you.
He was going to join Ajax, and in fact I think Bayern Munich were also in for him at the time.
I spent 3 days in Amsterdam.
So we had hijack it.
His agents called me, tell him to take the plane to fly to London.
We were breaking the mould. We had to rely on Arsene's judgment.
Adding a continental touch to Arsenal's never-say-die style is what Wenger is promising.
Quand je suis venu, je veux dire, il y a tout ce qu'il faut pour être un grand club. Je veux dire, ils ont un public qui est fabuleux.
I believe he has a great future. At the time, English players were dominant. It was a risk, yes, when we bought foreign players.
He knew what I was missing to go to the top.
We weren't used to this at Arsenal. We were very British. I was like, who are all these French guys?
Steve Bold turned around with his tray full of beers. I just remember Patrick Facegood swear.
He was special. How they see Milan got relegated.
Quite literally unbeatable.
Captain of the Invincibles.
You don't get a better legacy than that.
It was one of the greatest bargains in the history of Premier League transfers. Patrick Vieira, £3.5 million.
He should have a statue, in my opinion.
Everybody realised that guy could change the destiny of Arsenal Football Club.
The rest is history.
Khan at the time had one of the best academies in the country. I mean, Zidane is obviously the other outstanding one to come out of there. And for him to start at 17, for a team like Khan, who at that time was playing top 7, top 8 in France, and yet he was the best player on that team, pretty much. For us, in France, he was very, very highly rated.
I was coaching Monaco, and it was an end-of-season game. We played a kind of League Cup at the end of the season. He played with Khan, and I asked after the game, who is this guy? He won the challenge. He dominated the midfield. After the game, I said to my assistant, I've seen a great player today.
He was tall, he was strong, he was so determined, he was hard on people, but he could move the ball so well. He had everything. There was no doubt he was destined for great things.
I went a few times to watch Khan play. He had that presence, that he was quite complete player defensively and offensively. It was always difficult to buy the players from Khan to Monaco, and I thought I would try to get him to come to Monaco.
He was the next big thing. That's why AC Milan, who had a long history of obviously French players within their squad, signed him so young.
OK, let's take a look at the weather for you now.
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean all clear skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors Sky News Weather.
Well, it's looking mostly dry and calm again tomorrow, if gloomy, but it'll turn more unsettled from Tuesday. There'll be another mostly mild but rather murky start with extensive low cloud, hill fog and outbreaks of rain or drizzle. The rain will be concentrated over western Britain and southwestern Irish coasts. The morning looks like staying rather dull again, with further patchy rain, mostly over western Britain, but there's a greater chance of some brighter spells developing. Eastern Britain and the west of Ireland look most favoured. It'll be very mild generally, with mainly light winds. The afternoon will stay mostly dry, with brighter spells developing more widely. But England and Wales will see showery outbreaks becoming a little more widespread. Tuesday looks similar for Britain, at least during daylight.
All Clear Travel Insurance proudly sponsors Sky News Weather.
That was the wrap. Thank you so much for watching. All the top stories coming up right here on Sky News for you. We will leave you in the meantime with pictures of that fire in Glasgow.